The gown had consumed 4 months of Elara Thorne's life to craft. She had stitched it under the dim glow of her workshop's lamp, long after the last customer had departed, and the alley outside fell silent, laboring until her fingers ached and the lamp's oil dwindled. Midnight blue silk, adorned with meticulously hand-embroidered constellations across the bodice, tiny copper beads sparkling like scattered stars. It was the most exquisite creation she had ever brought into being, and significantly, the first she had made entirely for herself. Now, it was gone. The wardrobe doors gaped open, the hook where the dress had proudly hung now barren. Elara stared at the void with the profound stillness that precedes an emotional break. The spring ball was just 4 hours away. The entire town had buzzed with anticipation for weeks, stringing lanterns across the stone bridge and laying fresh rushes in the grand assembly hall upon the hill. And Elara had counted down the days. For this once, this single time, she would walk through those ornate doors wearing something made by her own 2 hands, finally feeling as if she belonged. She already knew who was responsible. "I sold it." Her mother's voice cut in from the kitchen doorway. She kept her gaze fixed on the bread she was slicing, her tone flat and utterly practical. "Eleanor Vance offered 12 crowns. We needed the funds." 12 crowns. 4 months of meticulous labor, sold for a pittance without a word to her. "We didn't need the funds." Elara's voice emerged steady, surprising even herself. "The shop earned enough this month. I showed you the ledger." "The shop earned enough for the shop," her mother countered, setting down the knife. Her cool, gray-green eyes finally met Elara's, and in their depths, Elara recognized something chilling. Not remorse, not regret. A profound satisfaction. The particular triumph of a woman who had, long ago, deemed her daughter's joy and extravagance to be swiftly curtailed. "You waste too much time on frivolous pursuits. A seamstress attending a ball in her own finest creation? People will talk. They'll say you're aspiring beyond your station." "It was mine," Elara insisted, the words a raw protest. "Nothing in this house is yours. You reside under my roof. You consume my provisions. You practice a trade I taught you." Her mother picked up the knife once more. "There will be other balls." Elara slowly closed the wardrobe door. The soft click of the latch was small, yet devastatingly final. She did not weep. She had ceased crying over her mother's pronouncements at 14, the year her mother had seized the embroidered shawl Odette's grandmother had bequeathed to her, exchanging it for a bolt of plain linen, claiming, "Sentiment is a luxury we cannot afford." Instead, she retreated to her workshop, settling onto her cutting table, pressing her palms flat against the wood, and breathing deeply. 4 hours. She had 4 hours. No gown, no money, and the absolute certainty that if she remained home tonight, her mother would have claimed a victory that could never truly be undone. A knock. Not at the house's front door, but the workshop door, the one opening onto the narrow service lane where deliveries arrived. Elara wiped her face, which, though dry, felt damp with unshed tears, and opened it. A man stood in the lane, tall, with shoulders so broad they made the doorframe appear unexpectedly small. He wore a dark coat, clearly well-made but deliberately unadorned, the kind of attire that cost a fortune to appear modest. His hair was a rich, dark cedar brown, thick and slightly wavy, falling across his forehead in a way that suggested he often pushed it back, only for it to stubbornly return. His eyes were deep espresso brown, warm and steady, and they observed her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. In his hands, he held a dress. Not just any dress, a gown of deep emerald green, the silk so exquisitely fine it flowed like liquid in the late afternoon light. The bodice was impeccably structured, elegantly detailed with delicate gold thread woven along the neckline, and the skirt cascaded in soft, gathered folds. It was breathtaking. It was also, Elara noted with the practiced eye of one who had handled a needle since childhood, not quite finished. The hem was pinned, not stitched. The sleeves required pressing. Almost perfect, crafted by a skilled hand, but time had clearly run out. Elara Thorne? His voice was low, not rough, precisely. More like the textured grain of fine wood. Yes? He extended the dress. Get ready. She stared at him, then at the gown, then back at him. I don't know who you are. Lorien, he stated simply, as if a name provided all the necessary context. I had this commissioned for someone who decided she preferred to wear crimson. It needs completion. The hem, the sleeves. He glanced down at the gown in his arms. I was informed you are the finest seamstress in Bridgewell. I am the only seamstress in Bridgewell. Something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched, and his eyes shifted in a way that made her stomach perform an unexpected flutter. That isn't what I heard. Elara looked at the dress once more. The silk was exceptional. The construction demonstrated profound skill, the work of someone who understood fabric with the same intuition a musician possessed for an instrument. You want me to finish this dress, she said slowly. I want you to finish it and wear it. He leaned against the doorframe, a casual movement that belied the intensity in his gaze. Those espresso brown eyes watched her with something heavier than mere curiosity. The ball is tonight. You intended to go. How do you know that? Because you are the woman who created the midnight blue gown with the constellation embroidery that Eleanor Vance is currently parading before half the merchant quarter as if she fashioned it herself. His words landed like a stone in still water. He knew about her dress. He knew it had been sold. He knew Eleanor Vance possessed it, and he had arrived here, at her workshop door, with a replacement. Who are you? Someone who believes a woman capable of creating such beauty should not have to watch another wear it. He straightened from the doorframe. Finish the dress, wear it to the ball. If you wish to return it afterward, you may. He laid the gown across her cutting table before she could voice a refusal. His hand brushed hers as he placed the fabric, and something inexplicable occurred. The lamplight in the workshop seemed to deepen, to intensify. The amber glow that had been ordinary moments ago transformed, becoming rich and warm, and the emerald green of the silk blazed with such vividness it almost hummed. The wood grain of her cutting table suddenly appeared as if an artist had painstakingly painted it, rather than being the familiar surface she saw daily. The entire room seemed to snap into sharp focus, as if she had been viewing the world through a thick fog, and someone had suddenly wiped the glass clean. Elara blinked. The sensation subsided, not entirely, but enough for her to draw a breath. 2 hours, Lorien said from the doorway. I will return for you. He was gone before she could formulate an argument. Elara stood in her workshop, a stranger's dress draped over her table, her hands filled with silk that felt impossibly alive beneath her fingers. And in that moment, she made a decision. She would finish the dress. She would wear it. And she would walk into that ball with her head held high and her shoulders back. And if her mother had anything to say about it, Ma Hargrove could say it directly to her face. She worked with furious speed. The hem took 40 minutes. Small, precise stitches designed to endure through hours of dancing. The sleeves required reshaping at the wrist, a tighter fit that would showcase the intricate gold threadwork. She pressed the bodice with a warm iron and adjusted the waist, taking it in by a 1/4 inch on each side. For whoever this dress had originally been intended was slightly broader through the ribs than Elara. The work grounded her. It always did. Her hands knew their purpose, even when the rest of her trembled. And by the time she slipped the finished gown over her head, and regarded herself in the workshop mirror. Something in her chest that had been tightly clenched since she'd opened the empty wardrobe finally eased. The dress fit as if it had been made specifically for her. The emerald silk warmed and enriched her cinnamon brown hair, and the gold at the neckline caught the lamplight, making her look like someone she almost recognized. Someone who belonged at a ball, someone who deserved to be there. Another knock. She opened the door. Lorien had changed. He now wore a dark, formal coat, impeccably tailored, with a high collar and buttons that gleamed with a dull gold luster. His hair had been pushed back, but already stray strands were falling forward, and his jaw was cleanly shaven. And those deep brown eyes moved over her with an intensity that commanded the attention of every nerve in her body. "You finished it," he said. "I'm a seamstress. It's what I do." "You didn't just finish it." He was looking at the wrists, where she had reshaped the sleeves, at the waist, where she had subtly altered it, at the hem, where her stitching was so flawless it was invisible. "You made it better." A warmth bloomed in her chest. Not merely from the compliment, but from the way he delivered it, as if he truly meant it, as if he had observed closely enough to notice the minute details and cared enough to articulate them. They walked to the ball together. The assembly hall crowned the crest of the hill above the town, and the path wound upwards through streets adorned with paper lanterns and garlands of early spring blossoms. The river below caught the last vestiges of the sunset, casting back fragments of broken gold. Elara could already discern the music, drifting down from the open doors of the hall, and with every step closer to this man, the colors around her, which she still couldn't name, intensified. The lanterns burned with a brighter fire. The blossoms appeared more vivid. The sunset was richer, deeper, and more saturated than any she had ever witnessed, and she kept glancing at Lorien, wondering if he, too, noticed. But his eyes remained steadfastly on her. "The woman who was meant to wear this dress," Elara began as they ascended. "Who is she?" "A lord's daughter from the Eastern Territories. She decided she preferred a different color 3 days before the event." He paused. "She changes her mind about most things. And you just happen to know a seamstress who lost her own dress today?" "I learned of it this afternoon. Word travels swiftly in small towns." "That isn't an answer." He looked at her, the lamplight catching his face. Something in those espresso brown eyes was careful, deliberate, and patient, as if he held a significant truth close, choosing precisely when to reveal it. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." They reached the hall. The doors stood wide open, golden light spilling onto the stone steps. Music and voices flowed into the evening air. Elara could see the bustling crowd within, merchants and officials in their finest coats, young couples already dancing. She had attended every year since she was 16, always in the background, always in a gown she had made for someone else and adjusted to fit. Not tonight. She entered on Lorien's arm and the room took notice. Not solely because of him, though he commanded attention simply by his presence. His height, his powerful shoulders, the quiet authority that clung to him like a force of nature. They noticed because of the dress, because of the way it moved, because of the gold threadwork that captured every candle flame in the room and reflected it back, and because Elara Thorne, the seamstress who crafted everyone else's finery, was now wearing something that outshone every other gown in the hall. Eleanor Vance stood near the punch table, clad in the midnight blue dress, Elara's dress, with the constellation embroidery that had demanded 3 weeks of evening labor, and she stared at Elara with an expression suspended between shock and fury. Elara looked at the dress on Eleanor's body and felt something she hadn't anticipated. Not jealousy, not grief. Release. That dress belonged to a version of her who had sat alone in a workshop, stitching by lamplight and merely hoping someone would see her. The woman standing here now, in emerald silk she had perfected with her own hands, had walked through the front door herself. Lorien led her to the center of the room. The musicians were playing a slow, sweeping melody, strings and a low drum. He turned to face her, offered his hand, and said, "Dance with me." "I should warn you," Elara said. "I'm not very good." "I don't care." His hand closed around hers. The world sharpened once more, a sudden vivid rush that stole her breath. The candlelight turned intensely golden and thick. The music gained a richness she could feel vibrating in her chest, and the green of her dress blazed like a living flame. She could discern every single thread in his coat, every tiny fleck of warmth in those dark brown eyes. And the room around them softened to a blurred backdrop, while the space between their bodies became the most intricately detailed, most vibrantly alive place in the entire world. They danced. He was steadfast and sure, holding her as if she were something infinitely precious. One hand at her waist, the other clasped around her fingers. He smelled of cedar, old paper, and the clean, sharp air after a rain shower. She stepped on his foot twice, and he didn't flinch. The second time, she laughed, a genuine, unbidden laugh, and something in his expression cracked open. "There it is," he murmured. "There's the you without the armor." The song ended. Another began. They did not stop. Halfway through the third dance, a voice sliced through the music. "Elara." Her mother, Ma Hargrove, stood at the edge of the dance floor. She was not dressed for a ball, clad instead in her everyday house clothes, her graying hair pulled back, her mouth set in the thin, unforgiving line that meant she had come to reclaim what she believed was hers. Her flat, gray-green eyes moved from Elara to the dress, to Lorien, and back to Elara, and something cold and precise settled into her gaze. "Where did you get that dress?" Elara stopped dancing. Lorien's hand tightened on her waist, a small, instinctive pressure that conveyed, "I am here." But he didn't step forward. He didn't speak. He allowed her this moment. "Someone gave it to me," Elara said. "Someone gave you a dress worth 30 crowns? Ma's voice carried, echoing through the hall. Heads turned. People began to listen. The music played on, but the dancers nearby had slowed, watching the seamstress and the woman who so resembled her mother engage in a conversation that felt like a fuse, igniting. "Take it off. Come home. You're disgracing yourself." "No." The word was quiet, yet it filled the space between them. "I said no, Mother." Elara's hands were trembling. She pressed them against the silk of her skirt and felt the fabric warm beneath her palms, grounding her. "You sold my dress, the one I made, 4 months of my work, sold for 12 crowns without asking me. And you did it because you wanted to, not because we needed the money, because you couldn't bear the idea of me wearing something beautiful to a place where people might look at me and see something other than your daughter, the seamstress." The room had fallen silent. Even the musicians had softened their play, the melody fading to a whisper. "You have done this my entire life." Elara's voice didn't falter. It strengthened. "Grandmother's shawl. The lace collar I crafted when I was 15. The commission portfolio I assembled to apply for the guild. The one that vanished from my desk. And you claim the cat knocked it into the fire. Every single time I made something that might have taken me somewhere, you took it away. And I let you, because I believed that was what daughters were supposed to do." Ma's jaw tightened. Her eyes darted to the watching crowd, then back. "You are causing a scene." "Good." Elara stepped forward. "I am causing a scene in a dress I finished with my own hands, at a ball I walked into on my own feet. And I am telling you, in front of every person in this room, that you do not get to take things from me anymore. Not my work, not my joy, not my life. Silence. An absolute ringing silence." Ma's face cycled from white to red, then settled into something rigid and closed. She looked at Elara with the expression one reserves for a door locked from the inside. Then she turned and walked out of the hall. Elara's knees buckled. Not dramatically, just a subtle softening, a yielding, the way a held breath finally escapes. Lorien was there instantly, his hand at her back, warm and steady, guiding her through the hushed crowd, through a side door, and out onto the balcony that overlooked the river and the town below, all of it strung with lanterns, all of it shining. The night air struck her skin, and she gasped. Her hands were still sharper than she had ever seen them. You sharper than she had ever seen them. You were magnificent, Lorien said quietly. I was terrified. Those aren't mutually exclusive. He stood beside her, close but not encroaching, his voice low and certain. Elara, there's something I need to tell you. She looked at him. The lamplight from inside caught half his face, turning the cedar of his hair to bronze and throwing his features into sharp relief. The strong jaw, the careful mouth, the eyes that had been watching her all night with something far deeper than mere interest. My name is Lorien Hawthorne, he said. I am the High Alpha of the Northern Reach. I came to Bridgewell to attend the spring ball without the politics, without the ceremony, just to experience a town I'd heard was beautiful. He paused. And then I heard about a seamstress whose mother had sold the dress she'd made for herself. And I went to her workshop with a gown that needed finishing because I wanted to see what kind of woman embroiders constellations by lamplight. The High Alpha. The man who ruled every territory from the Reach to the southern coast. The man whose name was spoken in council halls and whispered in market squares, whose face she had never seen because he was young, new to the throne, and had never toured the river towns. You brought me a dress, she said faintly. I brought you a reason to come tonight. He turned to face her fully, and the air between them shimmered, not metaphorically. The colors deepened, the edges sharpened, and Elara realized with a heart-stopping rush that the vivid, saturated world she had been perceiving all evening was not her imagination. It was him. It was what happened when he was near. I didn't understand why until I touched your hand in the workshop, and the entire world changed color. The bond, she whispered. Yes. You're telling me you're the High Alpha and my fated mate, and you led with the dress? Something that was definitely a smile now, small and real, and faintly helpless, touched his lips. I thought the dress was more immediately useful than the title. Elara laughed. It emerged half broken, half bright, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, the laugh transforming into something that trembled. And Lorien stepped closer and spoke her name. Just her name. Elara. He said it as if it held all meaning, said it as if it were the only word he needed. And she looked up at him, with the river shining below and the lanterns burning vividly and impossibly bright. And she said, You're going to have to explain a lot more than this. I know. I'm a seamstress from a river town. I know. My mother just humiliated me in front of everyone I've ever met. No. His hand rose. His fingers brushed her jaw, light as a breath, tilting her face up toward his. The contact sent a wave of color through her vision, the stars brightening, the lantern light turning to pure gold. His face was so close she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, and the way his pupils had widened until there was barely any brown left. You stood up for yourself in front of everyone you've ever met. There's a difference. He kissed her, slow, deliberate, his mouth on hers with a careful pressure that spoke volumes of restrained desire. His hand slid from her jaw to the back of her neck, fingers threading into her hair, and the world exploded into color. Not just brighter, but richer, deeper. Every shade she had ever known became its fullest, most vibrant self, and the sensation poured through her like light through glass, warm, overwhelming, and impossibly right. She clutched the front of his coat and pulled him closer, kissing him back, and the bond between them sang, a silent chord resonating in her very bones. When they finally broke apart, she was breathing hard, and the river below was the most breathtaking thing she had ever witnessed. And Lorien Hawthorne was looking at her as if she were the only real thing in the entire world. "Come with me," he said. "Not tonight. Not because of a bond or a title or a dress. Come with me when you are ready. Bring your workshop. Bring your needles and your silk and your constellation patterns. Come because you want to." "Where?" "The capital. The Northern Keep." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "The royal household possesses a textile workshop that has not had a master in 6 years. It features 8 looms and a cutting room with windows that face the sea, providing more natural light than any workshop in the entire territory." "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a life. The job is simply how I'm getting you to consider it." 2 months later, Elara Thorne stood in a workshop with windows that overlooked the sea. The morning light poured in, clear and clean, and the cutting table was 3 times the size of her old one. The silk bolts on the shelves originated from 6 different territories, and the dress she was currently working on was, once again, for herself. A deep gold gown with embroidered wildflowers along the hem, each one stitched by hand in the vibrant colors of the river town she had left behind. Lorien found her there most mornings. He would lean in the doorway, exactly as he had leaned in her old workshop door that first evening, watching her work with those espresso brown eyes that still made the world explode into vivid color every time they met hers. The bond had not diminished. If anything, it had deepened. Colors were richer now, textures more alive. She could feel him at the periphery of her awareness like a warm, constant current. And when he was away, at council or patrolling the territory borders, the world would flatten slightly, turn a muted gray, and she would gaze at her fabrics and think, almost, but not quite. And then he would walk through the door, and the silk would blaze to life beneath her hands. "The guildmaster from Bridgewell sent a letter," Lorien announced from the doorway. He held a cup of tea in each hand, his hair falling into his face, wearing a shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked nothing like a king, and everything like the man who had appeared at her door with a dress and 2 simple words: "Get ready." "What does it say?" Elara set down her needle. "They wish to commission you formally, the entire textile guild. It seems the seamstress who walked into the spring ball in emerald silk and defied her mother in front of the entire town has become something of a legend." He handed her the tea, their fingers brushing. Color bloomed, a warm rush of gold through the morning light. "Also, your mother has relocated to her sister's house in the eastern quarter. The workshop on Mill Lane is empty." "I don't need it anymore." "No." He looked around her new workshop. The sea light, the opulent silks, the 8 looms and the expansive windows, and the woman at the center of it all, stitching wildflowers into gold. "You don't." Elara picked up her needle. The thread was copper, almost the exact shade as the beads on the midnight blue dress she had crafted in another life, in a dark workshop, by the dying light of a lamp, hoping someone would finally see her. She didn't need anyone to see her now. She saw herself. That was the profound difference. Lorien sat on the workbench beside her, close enough that the world hummed with color. He drank his tea and watched her work, saying nothing. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a king could do was sit quietly beside the woman he loved while she created something beautiful. Outside, the sea turned gold in the morning light. Inside, Elara stitched, and the thread caught the sun, and the colors were exactly, perfectly, impossibly real.